The crack of her hand across my face echoed through the decorated hall like a gunshot. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward us, some gasping, some frozen with champagne glasses halfway to their lips. The string quartet stopped mid-note. My cheek burned hot, and I could feel the imprint of her ring cutting into my skin just below my eye. For a moment, the entire world went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, could feel the blood rushing to the spot where she'd struck me. My son's fiancée stood there in her $8,000 wedding gown, her face twisted with rage, her chest heaving. The veil had slipped sideways from the force of her swing, and her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the ugly fury in her eyes. "That's what you get," she hissed through clenched teeth, loud enough for the front 3 tables to hear clearly. "That's what you deserve for trying to ruin my day." I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even lift my hand to touch my burning cheek. I just stood there, 62 years old, in my mother of the groom dress that I'd spent 3 months' worth of grocery money on, feeling the weight of 200 stares pressing down on my shoulders. Then I heard footsteps, quick, decisive footsteps. My son Marcus appeared between us, his face drained of color, his jaw set in a way I'd only seen a handful of times in his 34 years of life. He looked at me first, really looked at me, and I watched something shift behind his eyes. Then he turned to his bride, the woman he'd been about to promise his life to just minutes before. "The wedding is off," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but in that silent hall, it carried to every corner. "Everyone, please leave. The wedding is off." But to understand how we got there, how we arrived at that moment of violence and heartbreak in front of 200 guests, with a 5-tier cake waiting in the other room and a honeymoon to Bora Bora already paid for, I need to take you back. Back to where this all began. Back to when I first met the woman who would slap me at what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. My name is Evelyn Clark, but most folks call me Evie. I'm 62 years old, and I've lived my whole life in Millbrook, Ohio, population 3,847, though that number's been slowly dropping for the past 20 years as young people move away to bigger cities with better opportunities. Before that day at the wedding, I had lived what most people would call an unremarkable life. I worked for 33 years as a secretary at Millbrook Elementary School, raised my son Marcus as a single mother after my husband died when Marcus was just 7, and spent my weekends tending my vegetable garden and playing piano at our small Lutheran church. I'm not telling you this story because I want sympathy. I'm telling you this because I want every mother out there, every woman who's ever been told she's too sensitive or too protective or interfering, I want you to know that sometimes your gut is right. Sometimes those little warning bells that everyone tells you to ignore are actually alarm sirens, and you should have listened from the very beginning. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me start properly. If you're watching this video, please hit that like button right now, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from folks all over. And if you see that hype button, click it. It helps this story reach more people who might need to hear it, and that means the world to me. Now, let me tell you how I ended up with a handprint on my face at my only son's wedding. It was April 2023 when Marcus first told me about Vanessa. He called me on a Tuesday evening. I remember because Tuesday was my grocery shopping night, and I was just putting away the last of the eggs when my phone rang. "Mom," he said, and I could hear something different in his voice. Excitement, maybe? Or nervousness. I met someone special. Marcus had always been a careful boy, even as a child. After his father died, Tom had a heart attack at 39, just collapsed one day at his job at the hardware store. Marcus became even more cautious about everything. He studied hard, got good grades, went to Ohio State on a partial scholarship, and became an accountant. He was methodical, detail-oriented, slow to trust. He'd had girlfriends over the years, but nothing serious, nothing that made his voice sound like this. "Tell me about her," I said, settling into my worn armchair, the one Tom and I had bought at a yard sale when we were first married. The upholstery was faded now, but I couldn't bear to replace it. "Her name is Vanessa Pritchard. She's 28, works in marketing at a firm in Columbus. We met at a conference 3 months ago." 3 months? He'd been seeing her for 3 months and hadn't mentioned her until now. That should have been my first clue, but I brushed it aside. Marcus was private. He always had been. "She sounds lovely," I said. "When do I get to meet her?" There was a pause. "Soon, Mom. Real soon. I wanted to tell you about her first. Get your blessing, I guess." "Marcus, honey, you're 34 years old. You don't need my blessing to date someone." "I know, but I want it anyway." That was my boy. Even grown, even living an hour away in Columbus, even with his own life and his own career, he still cared what his mother thought. It made my heart swell and ache at the same time. I'd raised him right, raised him to value family and respect. I just wish I'd raised him to trust his own judgment a little more when it came to reading people's character. "Of course you have my blessing," I told him. "I can't wait to meet her." I met Vanessa 3 weeks later on a Sunday afternoon in May. Marcus drove her down to Millbrook, and they arrived just as I was pulling a roast chicken out of the oven. I'd spent the whole morning cleaning my little house, arranging fresh flowers from my garden in every room, baking my grandmother's apple pie recipe. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted her to see that even though we weren't wealthy, even though my house was small and my furniture was old, we were good people with good hearts. When the doorbell rang, I smoothed down my dress, a simple blue cotton one I'd bought on sale at Kohl's, and hurried to answer it. Marcus stood there grinning, looking happier than I'd seen him in years, and next to him was Vanessa. She was beautiful. There's no denying that. Tall and slender, with long dark hair that fell in perfect waves down her back, olive skin, and these striking green eyes. She wore white, designer jeans. I could tell they were designer because they had that intentional rip in the knee that somehow cost more than intact pants, and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire Sunday outfit. Her nails were perfect, her makeup was perfect. Everything about her screamed polish and money and sophistication. "Mrs. Clark," she said, extending her hand. Not a hug, which struck me as odd. Most of Marcus's previous girlfriends had gone in for hugs right away, that casual American friendliness. But Vanessa offered her hand, formal and cool. "Please call me Evie," I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, almost aggressive. Her fingers were cold despite the warm May sunshine. "Evelyn," she said, completely ignoring my request to use my nickname. "It's so nice to finally meet you. Marcus has told me so much about you." There was something in the way she said it. Finally, like 3 months was some incredibly long time to wait. Like I should have been introduced immediately, as if she were royalty granting an audience. But I shook off the feeling. I was being oversensitive, I told myself. She was probably just nervous. I ushered them inside, chattering about the meal I'd prepared, asking about their drive down from Columbus. Marcus looked relaxed and happy, but I noticed he kept glancing at Vanessa, like he was checking to make sure she was okay, make sure she approved. That was different. Marcus had always been independent, confident in his own space. But around Vanessa, he seemed watchful, careful. We sat down to dinner, the dining table that had been Tom's grandfather's, the china that had been my mother's, the simple country meal I'd worked so hard on. Vanessa picked at her food, moving it around her plate more than eating it. "Is everything okay with the chicken?" I finally asked, worried I'd overcooked it. "Oh, it's fine," she said with a tight smile. "I'm just watching my figure. Wedding season." "You know, all those photos." Wedding season? It was May. People got married in wedding season. But we'd only just met, and already she was talking about wedding photos? "Are you in a lot of weddings this summer?" I asked, trying to make conversation. She looked at me like I'd said something incredibly stupid. "My own wedding, Evelyn, eventually, when Marcus finally proposes." She said it lightly, with a laugh, but she squeezed Marcus's hand hard enough that I saw his fingers go white. Marcus laughed too, but it sounded forced. "We're not rushing into anything, Vanessa." "Of course not," she said sweetly. "But we're not getting any younger either, are we, sweetheart?" The rest of the dinner was uncomfortable. Vanessa asked pointed questions about the house. How long had I lived there? What was the square footage? Was the neighborhood safe? She asked about my job at the elementary school with this tone that suggested working as a secretary was somehow beneath her notice. She asked about Marcus's father, and when I told her Tom had died when Marcus was young, she simply said, "How tragic," without a shred of real sympathy in her voice. When they left, Marcus hugged me tight at the door. "She's great, right, Mom?" he whispered. I hugged him back and lied. "She's lovely, honey. I'm so happy for you." But that night, lying in bed in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and felt a cold weight in my stomach. I'd been a mother for 34 years. I'd been a wife for 12 before that. I'd been a secretary in an elementary school for 3 decades, watching thousands of children and parents come through those doors. You develop an instinct for people. You learn to read the ones who are genuine and the ones who are performing. You learn to spot the parents who hit their kids, the ones who neglect them, the ones who push too hard. You develop a sense for danger. And every instinct I had was screaming that Vanessa Pritchard was dangerous. But what could I do? I couldn't tell Marcus. He was 34 years old, successful, independent. If I said anything negative about Vanessa, I'd just be the overbearing mother, the jealous woman who couldn't let go of her son. I'd seen it happen with other mothers I knew. They spoke up about their concerns, and their children stopped calling, stopped visiting. I couldn't bear the thought of losing Marcus, so I stayed quiet, and I prayed I was wrong. Over the next few months, I saw Marcus and Vanessa exactly 4 times. Each visit followed the same pattern. Marcus would call a few days ahead, sounding excited and nervous. They'd drive down to Millbrook. Vanessa would be polite but cold, picking apart everything from my cooking to my decorating with subtle comments that stung more than outright insults would have. "Oh, you still have carpet in the living room? Most people have switched to hardwood. It's more hygienic." "This china pattern is quaint, very 1970s. "You keep plastic flowers in the bathroom? I suppose real flowers are expensive to maintain." Every comment had that same quality, ostensibly innocent, but designed to cut, designed to make me feel small and poor and old-fashioned. And Marcus never seemed to notice, or if he did, he didn't say anything. In August, Marcus called me on a Thursday evening. "Mom, I need to tell you something." My heart jumped into my throat. "What is it? Are you okay?" "I'm great, Mom. Better than great. I proposed to Vanessa last weekend. We're engaged." I sat down hard on the arm of the couch. 4 months. They'd been together for 7 months total, and he'd proposed. My careful, methodical son, who took 3 weeks to decide on a new car, had proposed after 7 months to a woman I'd met exactly 4 times. "Marcus, that's wonderful, honey. Congratulations." The words felt like stones in my mouth. "We're thinking about a spring wedding, April or May next year." "Nothing too big, maybe 200 people. Vanessa's family is pretty large, and she wants a formal ceremony, a real wedding, with all the traditional stuff." 200 people wasn't big? I'd gotten married in my parents' backyard with 40 guests and a sheet cake from the grocery store, and it had been perfect. But I didn't say that. That sounds beautiful, Marcus. Have you set a date yet? May 18th, we found this venue in Columbus, the Riverside Estate. It's where all the big weddings happen. Vanessa's always dreamed of getting married there. Of course she had. I looked around my small living room with its worn carpet and its secondhand furniture, and I wondered how I was going to afford to be the mother of the groom at a wedding at the Riverside Estate. "I'm so happy for you," I said, and tried to mean it. The engagement period was when things really started to show Vanessa's true colors. She called me exactly once to tell me that the mother of the groom traditionally pays for the rehearsal dinner, and she'd already booked a restaurant in Columbus that required a $5,000 minimum. $5,000. I made $32,000 a year at the elementary school. I had $11,000 in savings, my entire retirement fund, built up penny by penny over 33 years. $5,000 was more than I spent on groceries in an entire year. "Vanessa," I said carefully, "I'm not sure I can afford that. Maybe we could do something smaller, a nice dinner at a more casual place?" The silence on the other end of the line was ice cold. "Evelyn, this is your only son's wedding. Are you really going to be cheap about the rehearsal dinner?" Cheap. She called me cheap, like I was being stingy instead of literally not having the money. "It's not about being cheap," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about what I can realistically afford." "Well, figure it out," she said curtly. "Marcus deserves a nice wedding, and that includes a proper rehearsal dinner. I'm sure you can take out a loan or something." A loan? She wanted me to go into debt for a $5,000 dinner. I called Marcus that night. "Honey, can we talk about the rehearsal dinner?" "Oh, Mom, isn't it great that Vanessa found such a nice place? I know it's a lot, but we can help." "Marcus, I can't afford $5,000. I'm sorry, but I just can't. Can we maybe do something simpler?" There was a long pause. "Let me talk to Vanessa," he finally said. 2 days later, he called back. "Vanessa says she'll cover half if you can do $2,500. $2,500? Still almost 3 months of my salary. But I heard the pleading in Marcus's voice, heard how much he wanted this to work out, how much he wanted his mother and his fiancé to get along. "Okay," I said, $2,500. I can do that." I took it out of my savings. My retirement fund dropped from $11,000 to $8,500. I was 61 years old, and I'd just given away a quarter of everything I'd ever managed to save. But the rehearsal dinner was just the beginning. Vanessa called me 3 weeks later. "Evelyn, I need you to go dress shopping with me and my mother. It's tradition for the mothers to help pick the wedding dress." I should have been honored. I should have been touched that she wanted to include me. But the way she said it, like it was an obligation, a box to check, made my stomach turn. "Of course," I said, "I'd love to." The dress appointment was in Columbus, at a bridal boutique that didn't even have prices in the window. That's how you know a place is expensive, when they won't even tell you what things cost until you're already emotionally invested. Vanessa's mother, Patricia Pritchard, met us there. She was in her early 50s, impeccably dressed, driving a BMW that probably cost more than my house. She greeted her daughter with air kisses, one on each cheek, and looked at me like I was the help. "You must be Evelyn," she said, shaking my hand limply. "I've heard so much about you." Nothing about that statement was complimentary. We spent 3 hours in that boutique. Vanessa tried on dress after dress, each one more elaborate and expensive than the last. Patricia made comments about each one. "The beading is exquisite. The train is too short. The neckline isn't flattering." I sat on a velvet couch feeling completely out of place, sipping the champagne they'd offered and wondering what I was supposed to say. Finally, Vanessa emerged in a dress that looked like something from a fairy tale. Layers of silk and lace, a cathedral train that stretched 10 feet behind her, intricate beading that caught the light with every movement. She looked stunning. "This is it," she breathed, staring at herself in the three-way mirror. "This is the one." Patricia clapped her hands together. "It's perfect, darling. Absolutely perfect." They both turned to me expectantly. "What do you think, Evelyn?" "It's beautiful," I said honestly. "You look like a princess." Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you," she said, in a tone that suggested my opinion hadn't actually mattered one way or the other. The consultant brought over a folder with the price. I happened to glance at it as she set it down. $8,000. The dress cost $8,000. I thought of my own wedding dress, bought from a department store for $90. I thought of how beautiful I'd felt in it anyway, how Tom had cried when I walked down the aisle. I thought of my mother's wedding dress, hand-sewn by my grandmother, worn again by my sister, then carefully preserved. I thought about how much money could mean, how differently people could value things. But I didn't say any of that. I just smiled and watched Vanessa preen in her $8,000 dress. After that day, the calls from Vanessa became more frequent. She needed my opinion on flowers, but didn't actually want my opinion, just wanted me to agree with her choices. She needed me to address invitations, 200 of them, by hand, because it's more personal. She needed me to confirm my guest list. I was allowed to invite exactly 6 people: my sister, my 2 closest friends from church, and their spouses. Every interaction felt like a test. Every conversation left me feeling small and inadequate. But worst of all was watching Marcus. My son, my careful, thoughtful son, seemed to be disappearing. He lost weight. He looked tired every time I saw him. He smiled less. When I asked if everything was okay, he always said the same thing. "Just wedding stress, Mom. It'll be better after the wedding." I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him. I wanted to ask him if he really wanted to marry this woman, if he was happy, if he'd noticed how she made everyone around her feel lesser. But I didn't, because I was afraid of what he might say. I was afraid he might choose her over me. I was afraid of losing my son. So I kept my mouth shut. I addressed the invitations. I gave my opinions when asked and kept them to myself when they weren't welcome. I paid my $2,500 for the rehearsal dinner. I bought a dress for the wedding, a simple lavender gown from Macy's that cost me $230 and made me feel sick about spending even that much. And I watched the calendar tick down to May 18th with a sense of dread that grew heavier every day. In February, 4 months before the wedding, Vanessa called me on a Sunday morning. I was just getting back from church, still in my good clothes, when the phone rang. "Evelyn, we need to talk about the rehearsal dinner menu." We'd already discussed the menu 3 times. I'd already told her that for $2,500, we could afford the chicken option or the fish option, but not the steak. "What about it?" I asked, hanging up my coat. "I've been thinking, and I really want the surf and turf option. It's so much more elegant." The surf and turf option would push the cost to $4,000. "Vanessa, I can't afford that. We already discussed this." "But Evelyn, this is Marcus's special day. Don't you want it to be perfect?" There was that manipulation again, suggesting that if I didn't bankrupt myself, I didn't love my son enough. "I want Marcus to be happy," I said firmly, "but I'm not taking on more debt for one dinner. We're sticking with what we already planned." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Fine," she snapped, But don't blame me when people remember the rehearsal dinner as cheap and boring." She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood in my little hallway, phone still in my hand, and felt something shift inside me. For the first time since meeting Vanessa, I felt anger instead of just hurt. Who was she to call me cheap? Who was she to dictate how I spent money I didn't have? Who was she to make me feel guilty for not being wealthy? I called Marcus. "We need to talk." "Mom, if this is about the rehearsal dinner, Vanessa already told me." "Marcus, stop. Please just listen to me for 5 minutes." He went quiet. I could hear music in the background, could picture him in his apartment in Columbus. "I love you," I said. "You know that, right? You're my whole world. You have been since the day you were born." "I know, Mom. I'm worried about you. I'm worried about this wedding, about Vanessa, about how you've been acting lately. You don't seem happy, honey. You seem stressed and tired and diminished. Is this really what you want?" The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Then, "Mom, I love Vanessa. I know she can be particular. I know she's demanding, but that's just because she wants things to be perfect. She's had a rough life, you know. Her parents are divorced. Her dad barely talks to her. She's had to work really hard for everything she has. She just wants this wedding to be special." I hadn't known any of that. Vanessa never talked about herself, never shared anything vulnerable or real. But even if it was true, did it excuse how she treated people? Did it excuse how she treated me? "I understand," I said, though I didn't. "I just want you to be sure. Marriage is forever, Marcus. It's okay to pump the brakes if you're having doubts." "I'm not having doubts," he said, but he said it too quickly. "I love her, Mom. I'm going to marry her. I just need you to support me. Can you do that?" What could I say? Of course I can, honey. Of course. But after we hung up, I sat down at my kitchen table and cried. I cried for my son, who was making a terrible mistake and couldn't see it. I cried for myself, for the retirement money I'd spent trying to buy his happiness. I cried for Tom, wishing he was still alive to help me navigate this impossible situation. Tom had always been good with people, always knew what to say. He would have known how to handle this. March came. April arrived. The wedding loomed closer. I marked off the days on my calendar like a prisoner counting down to execution. 3 weeks before the wedding, Marcus and Vanessa came down to Millbrook. It was the first time they'd visited in months, and I was so happy to see Marcus that I hugged him tight and didn't want to let go. We had lunch, sandwiches, and homemade soup, and for the first time in ages, Vanessa seemed almost pleasant. She complimented the soup, she asked about my garden, she even smiled when I showed her photos of Marcus as a child. I started to wonder if maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe the stress of wedding planning had made her act badly, and now that the end was in sight, she could relax. Maybe there was a real person under all that polished perfection. Then, as they were getting ready to leave, Vanessa said, "Oh, Evelyn, I meant to tell you. We need you to come to Columbus next weekend for the final dress fitting." "Your dress fitting?" I asked, confused. "No, your dress fitting for the mother of the groom dress." I looked down at my lavender gown hanging on the back of my bedroom door, visible through the hallway. I already have a dress. Vanessa followed my gaze and her face went rigid. "That dress?" "Yes, I bought it in January. It's..." "Absolutely not," she cut me off, her voice sharp. "That dress is completely inappropriate. The color is wrong, the style is wrong, everything about it is wrong." I felt my face flush hot. What's wrong with it? "Evelyn, I sent you very specific guidelines about the wedding colors and the dress code. Did you even read them?" She had sent me a packet of information in December, a 20-page packet detailing every aspect of the wedding, including a section on what the mother should wear. I'd skimmed it, seen that it suggested jewel tones and floor-length gowns, and thought my lavender dress fit perfectly. I read them, I said stiffly. This dress is floor length and it's a jewel tone. Lavender is not a jewel tone, Vanessa said, her voice rising. Jewel tones are emerald, sapphire, ruby, deep colors. That dress looks like something you'd wear to an Easter service at a nursing home. Marcus put his hand on her arm. Vanessa, come on. No, Marcus, this is important. This is our wedding, and I won't have your mother showing up looking like she bought her dress at a thrift store. I bought it at Macy's, I said quietly, and it cost me $230. Vanessa laughed, actually laughed. $230? Evelyn, my shoes cost more than that. You can't wear that dress. I already ordered a gown for you, something appropriate. It'll be ready next weekend. It's $2,800, and you can pay me back whenever. $2,800. For a dress. For a single dress that I would wear for one day. No, I said. The word came out firm and clear. I'm wearing the dress I bought. It's appropriate, it's beautiful, and it's what I can afford. Vanessa's face transformed. The polite mask she'd been wearing cracked, and underneath was pure rage. You're going to ruin my wedding because you're too cheap to buy a proper dress? I'm not ruining anything. I'm wearing a perfectly nice dress that I already bought and paid for. Marcus, Vanessa turned to him, her voice climbing toward hysteria. Are you going to let your mother ruin our wedding? Are you going to let her show up looking like a church lady and embarrass us in front of my entire family? Marcus looked between us, his face pale. Mom, maybe you could just look at the dress Vanessa picked? Maybe you'd like it? I'm sure it's beautiful, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. But I'm not spending $2,800 on a dress. I'm sorry, but I'm just not. Vanessa grabbed her purse from the couch. Fine, fine. Wear whatever you want. But don't expect me to include you in any of the family photos. I'm not having my wedding pictures ruined by your thrift store outfit. She stormed out, slamming my front door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. Marcus lingered for a moment. Mom. Go ahead, honey, I said tiredly. Go after her. I'll see you at the wedding. He hugged me quickly and left. I watched through the window as Vanessa screamed at him all the way to the car. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see her gesturing wildly, could see Marcus's shoulders hunched in defeat. That night, I took the lavender dress off its hanger and laid it on my bed. It was a beautiful dress. Simple, elegant, appropriate. It had cap sleeves and a modest neckline. The fabric had a subtle shimmer to it. It was exactly what a mother of the groom should wear. I decided then and there that I would wear it no matter what Vanessa said. This was my son's wedding. I had every right to be there, and I had every right to wear a dress that I'd chosen and paid for with my own money. But a small, afraid part of me wondered what would happen when I showed up in it. Would Vanessa make a scene? Would she refuse to take pictures with me? Would Marcus be angry? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of final preparations. Marcus called me 3 times, always sounding stressed, always assuring me that everything was fine even though his voice suggested otherwise. Vanessa didn't call at all, which I took as a blessing. My sister Linda came over on the Tuesday before the wedding to help me do my hair and makeup trial run. She'd been my rock through this whole ordeal, the only person I'd really confided in about my concerns. I still think you should talk to Marcus, she said, curling my hair with hot rollers that dated back to 1987. Really talk to him. Tell him everything you've noticed about her. I can't, I said. If I do that, I lose him. He'll think I'm jealous or overbearing or trying to control his life. And if you don't say anything, you lose him to her anyway. She was right, and I knew it. But what could I do at this point? The wedding was in 5 days. The dress was bought, the venue was booked, 200 people had already RSVP'd. The time for intervention had passed. On Wednesday, the day before the rehearsal dinner, I drove up to Columbus. I'd booked a room at a Holiday Inn Express near the venue, $95 a night, the cheapest place I could find. Marcus had offered to pay for a room at the hotel where most of the guests were staying, but that hotel was $240 a night, and I couldn't accept that from him. I checked in, unpacked my small suitcase, and hung up my lavender dress. Then I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and tried not to think about how much money I'd spent on this wedding. $2,500 for the rehearsal dinner, $230 for the dress, $95 for the hotel room, gas money, the wedding gift. I'd bought them a set of Christie wine glasses they'd registered for, another $150. All told, I'd spent close to $3,000, more than a month's salary, to watch my son marry a woman I couldn't stand. But he was my son, my only child, the most important person in my world. If this was what he wanted, if Vanessa was who he chose, then I would be there. I would smile and be gracious and keep my mouth shut. I would dance with him at the reception and tell him I was happy for him. I would do everything a mother was supposed to do, even if it killed me. The rehearsal was Thursday evening at 6 o'clock. I arrived at the Riverside Estate at 5:45, giving myself enough time to find parking and figure out where I needed to be. The estate was beautiful, a sprawling mansion on the banks of the Scioto River with manicured gardens and a white columned portico that belonged on a postcard. I found the chapel, a small, elegant room with dark wood cues and stained glass windows. About 20 people were already there: Vanessa's parents, her siblings, some bridesmaids, some groomsmen, and Marcus. He saw me and immediately came over, hugging me tight. "Mom, I'm so glad you're here." "Of course I'm here, honey. Where else would I be?" He looked tired, more than tired, exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he'd lost even more weight since I'd last seen him. His tuxedo shirt hung loose on his frame. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly. "Just nervous," he said with a strained smile. "Big day tomorrow." Before I could respond, Vanessa appeared at his elbow. She wore a tight black dress and heels that made her tower over everyone. She looked at me briefly, her gaze flicking to my outfit, khaki pants and a nice blouse, with obvious disapproval, but didn't say hello. "Marcus, we need to go over the processional order," she said, pulling him away. The wedding coordinator, a harried-looking woman named Jennifer, clapped her hands together. "All right, everyone, let's get started. If you're in the wedding party, please line up at the back of the chapel." The next hour was chaos. Jennifer directed people where to stand, where to walk, where to pause. Vanessa interrupted constantly, contradicting instructions, changing her mind about the order, complaining that the groomsmen weren't standing straight enough. "This is my wedding," she kept saying. "It needs to be perfect." Marcus stood at the altar looking miserable. I caught his eye once, and he gave me a tiny shrug, as if to say, "What can I do?" Finally, mercifully, the rehearsal ended. Jennifer announced that the rehearsal dinner would be at Palo's restaurant, just 10 minutes away. Everyone filed out to their cars. The restaurant was elegant but not ostentatious. White tablecloths, candles on every table, soft Italian music playing in the background. The room Vanessa had reserved could seat 60 people, though there were only about 35 of us there. I'd paid $2,500 for this dinner. For these people I barely knew, to eat chicken piccata and drink wine and toast to my son's future. I sat at a table with my sister Linda and her husband George, plus 2 of Marcus's college friends I vaguely recognized. Vanessa's family occupied the other tables, along with her friends and bridesmaids. The food came out, and I'll give Vanessa credit, it was delicious. The chicken was perfectly cooked, the pasta was homemade, the bread was warm and crusty. If I hadn't been so anxious, I might have actually enjoyed it. After dinner, it was time for toasts. Vanessa's father stood up first, giving a meandering speech about his daughter's childhood that managed to sound both sentimental and boastful. Then one of the groomsmen stood up, telling a funny story about Marcus in college. Then Vanessa's maid of honor, a tall blonde named Brittany, gave a tearful speech about how Vanessa was the best friend anyone could ask for. Then Vanessa stood up. "I want to say a few words," she announced, even though the bride doesn't typically speak at the rehearsal dinner. She smiled around the room, her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Tomorrow is going to be the most important day of my life. I've dreamed about my wedding since I was a little girl, and I'm so grateful that it's finally happening." She paused, and her smile got wider. "I want to thank everyone who made this possible. My parents for their love and support, my bridesmaids for putting up with my crazy planning, and most of all, I want to thank Marcus for being the man of my dreams." Everyone awed. Marcus smiled up at her. But even from across the room, I could see the tension in his face. "But," Vanessa continued, and something in her tone made my stomach drop, "I also want to address something that's been bothering me during this whole planning process." Oh no. "Planning a wedding is stressful," she said, her voice sugary sweet but with an edge underneath. "And it's even more stressful when you don't have support from the people who should be supporting you most." She wasn't. She wouldn't. "Some people," and her eyes flicked to me for just a second, "have made this process much harder than it needed to be. Some people have complained about costs, have refused to follow simple guidelines, have fought me on every single decision." The room had gone silent. Everyone was looking at Vanessa, but I could feel side glances coming my way too. "But tomorrow is my day," Vanessa said firmly, "and I won't let anyone ruin it. Not with their negativity, not with their cheap choices, not with their constant criticism." My face burned. She was talking about me in front of 35 people at a dinner I'd paid for. She was publicly calling me out. I started to stand up, not sure what I was going to say, but knowing I couldn't just sit there. Linda grabbed my wrist. "Don't," she whispered urgently. "Don't give her the satisfaction." She was right. If I said anything now, I'd look defensive. I'd look like I was causing drama. I'd be the villain in Vanessa's story. So I sat there, my face hot with humiliation, while Vanessa finished her speech. "Anyway," she said brightly, as if she hadn't just publicly humiliated the groom's mother, "I'm so excited for tomorrow. I love you all, and I can't wait to marry the man of my dreams." Everyone clapped. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The dinner ended shortly after that. People lingered for a while, having dessert and coffee, but I couldn't stay in that room another minute. I made my excuses to Linda and headed for the door. "Mom, wait." Marcus caught up with me in the parking lot. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was going to say that." "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. "It's not fine. That was inappropriate. I'll talk to her." "Marcus, don't. It's the night before your wedding. Don't fight with your bride over your mother." "But she was completely out of line." "Marcus." I put my hands on his shoulders and looked him in the eye. "Listen to me. Tomorrow, you're marrying this woman. You're promising to spend the rest of your life with her. I need you to be sure. I need you to be absolutely certain this is what you want. Because once you say I do, that's it. You're committed." He looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw doubt flicker across his face. But then he squared his shoulders and said, "I love her, Mom. I know she can be difficult, but I love her. This is what I want." I didn't believe him. But what could I say? Okay, honey. Then I'm happy for you. I hugged him. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. I drove back to my hotel room and cried. I cried for my son, for the mistake he was making. I cried for myself, for the helplessness I felt. I cried for Tom, wishing once again that he was here to help me, to tell me what to do. Finally, exhausted, I fell asleep fully clothed on top of the hotel comforter. The wedding day dawned bright and beautiful, a perfect May morning with blue skies and temperatures in the mid-70s, the kind of day that seemed designed for a fairy tale wedding. I woke up early, took a long shower, and started getting ready. I did my hair the way Linda had showed me, pinning it up in a soft bun at the nape of my neck. I applied my makeup carefully, foundation to even out my skin tone, a little blush, mascara, a soft pink lipstick. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw a 62-year-old woman who was trying her best to look dignified for her son's wedding. Then I put on the lavender dress. It fit perfectly. The color looked good with my complexion. The length was appropriate. The style was elegant without being flashy. I looked exactly like a mother of the groom should look. I thought about the $2,800 dress Vanessa had tried to force me to buy. I thought about her insistence that this dress was inappropriate, that I would embarrass her and Marcus by wearing it. Then I thought, too bad. This was my son's wedding. I had every right to be there, and I had every right to wear a dress that I'd chosen and paid for. If Vanessa didn't like it, that was her problem, not mine. I grabbed my purse, made sure I had my phone and my tissues, there would definitely be crying today, and headed out to my car. The wedding started at 4 o'clock. I arrived at the Riverside Estates at 3:15 as instructed. The parking lot was already filling up with expensive cars, BMWs, Mercedes, even a few Teslas. My 14-year-old Honda Civic looked distinctly out of place. Inside, the estate had been transformed. White flowers everywhere, roses, lilies, peonies. Ribbons and tulle draped from every surface. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Guests milled around, dressed in expensive suits and designer dresses, holding champagne glasses and chatting. I found my seat in the second row. Mother of the groom traditionally sits in the front row on the right side, but Vanessa had informed me months ago that she needed the front row for her extended family, so I'd been moved back. Fine with me. I sat down next to Linda and George and tried not to feel out of place. The chapel filled up quickly. 200 people, just like Vanessa had planned. Most of them I didn't know. Vanessa's family, her friends, her coworkers. Marcus's side of the chapel looked sparse by comparison. There was me, Linda and George, my 3 friends from church and their spouses, a handful of Marcus's college friends, and his coworkers from the accounting firm. At exactly 4 o'clock, the string quartet transitioned into the processional music. Everyone stood. The bridesmaids came down the aisle one by one, wearing matching emerald green dresses that probably cost $1,000 each. The groomsmen escorted them, wearing sleek black tuxedos. Then came the ring bearer and flower girl, Vanessa's nephew and niece, both adorable and well-behaved. Then the music changed to the bridal march. Everyone turned to look at the back of the chapel. And there was Vanessa in her $8,000 dress, looking like a princess from a fairy tale. Her father walked beside her, his chest puffed out with pride. She carried a bouquet of white roses and lilies that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. I looked at Marcus standing at the altar. He was watching her walk toward him, and he was smiling. Despite everything, despite the stress, the weight loss, the exhaustion, he was smiling. Maybe I was wrong, I thought. Maybe this would all work out. Maybe Vanessa would be a good wife. Maybe I'd been too critical, too protective. Maybe I just needed to let go and trust my son's judgment. Vanessa reached the altar. Her father kissed her cheek and took his seat. The officiant, a generic pastor who clearly didn't know either of them very well, began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The ceremony proceeded normally for the first 10 minutes. Prayers, readings, the standard wedding script. Vanessa and Marcus faced each other, holding hands. She looked radiant. He looked nervous but happy. Then came the vows. The officiant nodded to Marcus. Marcus, do you take Vanessa to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do you part? Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, there was a commotion at the back of the chapel. Wait! Everyone turned. A man in his late 50s was standing up, disheveled and red-faced. Wait, he said again, louder this time. I have something to say. Vanessa's face went white. Dad, sit down. So this was Vanessa's father, not the man who'd walked her down the aisle, but her biological father, the one Marcus said barely talked to her. I can't sit down, the man said, his words slurring slightly. Was he drunk? I can't sit here and watch this happen without saying something. Security, Vanessa's mother shouted. 2 estate staff members started moving toward the man. But he kept talking, his voice getting louder, more desperate. That woman is a liar. She's manipulative and cruel. She destroyed my life, she destroyed her mother's life, and she's about to destroy yours too, young man. Get him out of here, Vanessa screamed. Get him out. The security guards reached him, grabbing his arms. He struggled against them. You don't know what she's really like. You don't know what she's capable of. She'll take everything from you. Your money, your happiness, your soul. Marcus just stood there, frozen. That's enough, the officiant said, trying to restore order. This is a sacred ceremony. She made me lose my job, the man shouted as the guards dragged him toward the exit. She spread lies about me to everyone I knew. She's poison. She's... The chapel doors slammed shut, cutting off his words. For a moment, the entire room was silent. 200 people sat in stunned stillness. You could have heard a pin drop. Then Vanessa started crying. Not gentle, delicate tears, huge, heaving sobs that made her whole body shake. I'm so sorry, she gasped out between sobs. I'm so sorry everyone had to see that. He's sick. He's been sick for years. I tried to help him, but he refuses treatment. Her mother rushed up from the front row, wrapping her arms around Vanessa. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. He's gone now. Marcus stepped forward, looking uncertain. Vanessa, can we just continue? She asked, her voice small and wounded. Please, I just want to get married. I just want to marry you. The officiant looked around helplessly. The guests were all murmuring, uncomfortable and unsure. But what could anyone do? Call off the wedding because of one drunken outburst from an estranged father? All right, the officiant said eventually. Let's continue. Marcus, I'll ask you again. Do you take Vanessa to be your lawfully wedded wife? But Marcus was looking past Vanessa, looking at me. Our eyes met across the rows of guests, and I saw the question there. What do I do, Mom? What I wanted to say? Run. Run away from this woman as fast as you can. That man might have been drunk, but he was telling the truth. I can see it in the way she reacted, in the way she's already spinning this into a sympathy story. Run, Marcus, please. What I actually did, I gave him a small, sad smile and a tiny nod, because it wasn't my choice to make, it was his. He took a breath, squared his shoulders, and turned back to Vanessa. I do, he said. The officiant turned to Vanessa. And do you, Vanessa, take Marcus to be your lawfully wedded husband? "I do," she said, still crying, but smiling now too. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Marcus leaned in and kissed her. The guests applauded, but it was muted, uncertain. The magic of the moment had been shattered by the outburst. They walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife, and I watched my son go with a heavy heart. The chapel emptied out into the gardens for cocktail hour, while the staff flipped the room for the reception. I stood with Linda, sipping water and trying to process what had just happened. "That was something," Linda said quietly. "Do you think what that man said was true?" I asked. "I don't know, but I think you need to talk to Marcus, really talk to him, because something is very wrong here." But before I could respond, I felt someone tap my shoulder. I turned to find Vanessa standing there, no longer crying, her makeup somehow perfectly reapplied. "Evelyn," she said, her voice cold, "we need to talk." She led me away from the crowd toward a secluded corner of the garden. Her mother followed, standing a few feet away like a bodyguard. "I want to make something very clear," Vanessa said, her voice low and dangerous. "What happened in there with my father, that never happened. Do you understand? If anyone asks you about it, nothing. It was just a drunk man making a scene, nothing more." "But nothing more," she repeated, her eyes boring into mine. "And another thing, I saw the dress you wore. After I specifically told you it was inappropriate, you wore it anyway. That was a direct slap in my face, Evelyn. A statement that you don't respect me or my wishes on my wedding day." My temper, which I'd been holding back for months, finally sparked to life. "Vanessa, this is my son's wedding day too, not just yours. Mine, and I have every right to wear whatever dress I want." Her eyes narrowed. "You're just like my father, selfish, spiteful, trying to ruin my special day because you can't stand seeing me happy." "That's not true." "Stay away from Marcus," she said suddenly. "After today, I don't want you calling him. I don't want you visiting. You've caused me nothing but stress since the day we met, and I won't have you poisoning my marriage." I felt like I'd been slapped. "You can't keep me from my son." "I can, and I will. Marcus loves me. He'll choose me over you. He already has." "Vanessa, please." "The reception is starting in 20 minutes, she cut me off. "You can stay if you want, but don't expect to be in any family photos. And don't expect to dance with Marcus. This is my day, and I won't have you ruining one more second of it." She walked away, her mother glaring at me before following. I stood there in the garden, shaking with anger and shock and hurt. Linda found me a few minutes later. "What happened? You're white as a sheet." I told her, all of it, everything Vanessa had said. "That's it," Linda said firmly. "We're leaving. You don't need to stay here and be treated like this." "I can't leave. Marcus will think." "Marcus will understand, and if he doesn't, that's on him, not you." But I couldn't leave. Despite everything, I couldn't walk out on my son's wedding day. So I went to the reception. The ballroom had been decorated to match the chapel, white flowers, candles, twinkling lights. Round tables with expensive linens, place cards with calligraphy names, centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A DJ set up in the corner, a dance floor in the center, a 5-tier wedding cake that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I found my seat, table 9, near the back of the room. Not at the head table, not even close to it. Table 9, with 3 of Marcus's college friends I barely knew and their spouses. Dinner was served, filet mignon or Chilean sea bass, the menu card said. I picked at my food, too nauseous to eat much. Then came the speeches. The best man gave a funny toast. The maid of honor gave a tearful one. Vanessa's mother gave a long, rambling speech about what a perfect daughter Vanessa was. Then the DJ announced, "And now I'd like to invite the mother of the groom to say a few words." My heart jumped into my throat. We hadn't discussed this. I had prepared no speech, but everyone was looking at me expectantly, waiting. I stood up on shaky legs and made my way to the microphone. I looked at Marcus, sitting at the head table next to Vanessa. He gave me an encouraging smile. I thought about everything I wanted to say, all the warnings I wanted to give, all the truths I wanted to speak. But this was his wedding day, his choice, his life. So instead I said, "Marcus, from the day you were born, you have been my greatest joy. You are kind and thoughtful and smart, and I'm so proud of the man you've become. I hope your marriage brings you all the happiness you deserve. I love you, son." I handed the microphone back to the DJ and returned to my seat, short and sweet and safe. The reception continued. First dance, father-daughter dance, mother-son dance, except Vanessa shook her head when the DJ announced it was time for the mother-son dance, and Marcus didn't insist, so there was no mother-son dance. I sat at table 9 and watched other people dance with my son while I stayed in my chair. It was nearly 8 o'clock when I decided I couldn't take any more. I'd done my duty. I'd stayed for the ceremony and the dinner and the toasts. No one could say I hadn't been there for Marcus's wedding. I gathered my purse and was about to stand up when I saw Vanessa heading toward me. She was walking fast, her face flushed, her eyes wild. She'd had a lot to drink. I'd watched her down 4 glasses of champagne during dinner alone. "Evelyn," she said loudly, causing people at nearby tables to turn and look. "We need to talk." "Vanessa, I was just leaving." "No, you're not leaving yet. Not until I say what I need to say." She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard. I tried to pull away, but her grip was tight. "Vanessa, you're hurting me." "Good," she hissed, "because you've been hurting me this entire time. Do you think I don't know what you've been doing, trying to turn Marcus against me, telling him I'm not good enough? I never said that. You didn't have to say it. I can see it in your face every time you look at me. You hate me. You've hated me from the beginning." People were definitely watching now. I could see heads turning, conversations stopping. "Vanessa, please, let's discuss this somewhere private." "No, you know what? I'm glad your husband died." "I'm glad Marcus didn't have a father growing up, because if he did, you wouldn't have been able to baby him and smother him and turn him into a mama's boy." The words hit me like a physical blow. Did she really just say that? Did she really just tell me she was glad my husband died? "How dare you?" I whispered. "How dare I?" She laughed high and shrill. "How dare you, coming to my wedding in that cheap dress, making that pathetic little speech, sitting here looking all sad and martyred. This is my day, mine, and you're trying to make it all about you." "Vanessa, you're drunk, please." "I'm not drunk. I'm happy. I'm finally married to Marcus, and you can't do anything about it. You don't get to control him anymore. He's mine now." And that's when it happened. That's when she pulled her hand back and slapped me across the face as hard as she could. The crack of her hand across my face echoed through the decorated hall like a gunshot. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward us, some gasping, some frozen with champagne glasses halfway to their lips. The string quartet stopped mid-note. My cheek burned hot, and I could feel the imprint of her ring cutting into my skin just below my eye. For a moment, the entire world went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, could feel the blood rushing to the spot where she'd struck me. Vanessa stood there in her $8,000 wedding gown, her face twisted with rage, her chest heaving. The veil had slipped sideways from the force of her swing, and her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the ugly fury in her eyes. "That's what you get," she hissed through clenched teeth, loud enough for the front 3 tables to hear clearly. "That's what you deserve for trying to ruin my day." I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even lift my hand to touch my burning cheek. I just stood there, 62 years old, in my mother of the groom dress that I'd spent 3 months' worth of grocery money on, feeling the weight of 200 stares pressing down on my shoulders. Then I heard footsteps, quick, decisive footsteps. Marcus appeared between us, his face drained of color, his jaw set in a way I'd only seen a handful of times in his 34 years of life. He looked at me first, really looked at me, and I watched something shift behind his eyes. Then he turned to his bride, the woman he'd been married to for less than 4 hours. "The wedding is off," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but in that silent hall, it carried to every corner. "Everyone, please leave. The wedding is off." Vanessa laughed, actually laughed. "Marcus, don't be ridiculous. She's fine. She's just being dramatic." "You hit my mother," Marcus said, his voice shaking now, not with fear, but with rage. "You slapped her in front of 200 people at our wedding. She deserved it."
"She's been undermining me since the day we met. She wore that ugly dress on purpose to embarrass me. She gave that pathetic speech to make everyone feel sorry for her. She's been trying to ruin this day since—" "Get out," Marcus roared, and I'd never heard my son yell like that in my entire life. "Get out of this reception. Get out of my sight. This marriage is over before it even started." Vanessa's face went from rage to shock to panic in the span of 3 seconds. "Marcus, baby, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I've had too much to drink. I'm just stressed." "You told my mother you were glad my father died." His voice was quiet again, but there was steel in it. "You hit her. You've been cruel to her for months, and I've been too blind and too cowardly to see it." He turned to address the room full of stunned guests. "I'm sorry everyone came all this way. I'm sorry for the disruption, but this wedding is over. Please, everyone, go home." For a moment, nobody moved. 200 people sat frozen, unsure if this was real or some kind of strange performance art. Then Linda stood up. "You heard him. Let's give them some privacy." That broke the spell. People started gathering their things, whispering to each other, stealing glances at us as they filed out. Some looked sympathetic. Some looked gleeful. There's nothing people love more than wedding drama. Some just looked uncomfortable, eager to escape the awkwardness. Vanessa's mother rushed over. "Marcus, you're making a terrible mistake. My daughter just had too much to drink. She didn't mean any of those things. You can't throw away your marriage over one little incident." "One little incident?" Marcus turned on her. "Your daughter has been emotionally abusive to my mother for the entire engagement. She's been manipulative and cruel. And I've ignored it because I was afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of admitting I made a mistake. But I won't ignore this." "You'll regret this." Vanessa shrieked. "You'll never find anyone as good as me. You'll be alone for the rest of your pathetic life." "Then I'll be alone," Marcus said calmly. "Better alone than married to someone who would hit my mother." Vanessa looked around wildly, as if searching for someone to back her up. Her bridesmaids had already fled. Her mother stood there helplessly. Her father, the stepfather who'd walked her down the aisle, was nowhere to be seen. "Fine," she finally screamed. "Fine. I don't need you anyway. You're just a boring accountant with a dead-end job and a codependent relationship with your mother. I only said yes because I thought you had money." And there it was, The truth finally out in the open. She grabbed her train and stormed toward the exit, her mother scurrying after her. We could hear her shouting all the way down the hallway until the doors finally closed behind her. The ballroom was nearly empty now, just me, Marcus, Linda, and George.
And a few stragglers who were gathering their belongings. The DJ was packing up his equipment, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The catering staff stood uncertainly in the corners, unsure if they should start clearing tables or wait for further instruction. Marcus turned to me. His face was pale, his eyes were red, but he looked more clear-headed than I'd seen him in months. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And then my 34-year-old son collapsed into my arms and sobbed like he was 7 years old again, crying for his daddy who'd just died. I held him while he cried, stroking his hair, murmuring the same things I'd murmured when he was small. "It's okay, honey. It's okay. I'm here. I've got you." Linda and George quietly gathered our things and gave us space. The staff finished clearing out. Eventually, it was just Marcus and me in that enormous ballroom, surrounded by white flowers and candles and the remains of a wedding reception that never quite happened. When his tears finally slowed, he pulled back and looked at me. "Your face," he said, reaching up gently to touch my cheek where Vanessa had struck me. "Mom, I'm so sorry." "It's just a little red," I said, though I could feel it swelling. "I'll be fine." "You've been trying to tell me," he said quietly. "All this time, you've been trying to warn me, and I wouldn't listen." "You loved her, or you thought you did." "I don't know what I felt," he admitted. "I think I was just lonely. She paid attention to me. She made me feel special at first. And then, bit by bit, she started tearing me down, making me feel like I was never good enough, like I should be grateful she was willing to marry me at all." I thought of all the warning signs I'd seen, the weight loss, the exhaustion, the way he'd seemed to shrink around her. "What do you want to do now?" I asked. He looked around the ballroom, at the cake that would never be cut, the decorations that would never be enjoyed, the dreams that had just crumbled. "I want to go home," he said. "Your home. Can I stay with you for a few days? I don't want to go back to Columbus yet. I don't want to deal with any of this yet. I just want to be somewhere safe." "Of course, honey. Of course you can stay with me." We gathered what few belongings we had, my purse, his jacket, and headed for the parking lot. Linda and George were waiting by their car. "We'll follow you back to Millbrook," Linda said. "Make sure you get home okay." The drive back to my little house took an hour. Marcus rode with me, silent for most of the trip, staring out the window at the darkening landscape. At one point, he said quietly, "I spent $73,000 on that wedding." $73,000, more than twice my annual salary, more than my house was worth. All of it gone in one evening. "Money can be replaced," I said. "Your dignity and self-respect can't be." When we got home, I made Marcus take off his tuxedo and put on some old sweatpants and a t-shirt I'd saved from his teenage years. I made him sit at the kitchen table while I made hot chocolate, the same way I'd made it when he was a child, with real cocoa and whole milk and a handful of mini marshmallows on top. Linda and George stayed for a while, making sure we were both okay. Before they left, Linda pulled me aside. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," she said quietly, "standing there and taking that hit without fighting back. You saved Marcus tonight." "I didn't do anything. He made his own choice." "You gave him a choice to make. If you'd fought back, if you'd caused a scene, Vanessa would have played the victim. She would have made it all about how you attacked her on her wedding day. But you stayed calm, stayed dignified. You let her show everyone exactly who she is. That's what gave Marcus the clarity to walk away." I hadn't thought of it that way. I'd just been too shocked to react. But maybe Linda was right. Maybe sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. After they left, I sent Marcus to bed in his old room, the one I'd kept exactly as he left it when he moved out for college. I heard him crying through the door, soft sobs that broke my heart, but I didn't go in. He needed to grieve. He needed to process. He needed to feel his feelings without his mother hovering. I went to my own room and finally looked at my face in the mirror. My cheek was swollen and purplish red. There was a small cut just under my eye from Vanessa's ring. I looked like I'd been in a fight. I thought about Vanessa, probably back at whatever hotel she was staying at, raging at her mother about how unfair everything was. I thought about all the guests who'd witnessed the scene, already texting their friends, posting vague references on social media. I thought about the vendors who'd worked so hard on that wedding, the 5-tier cake that probably got thrown away, the flowers that would wilt unappreciated. And I thought about Marcus, sleeping in his childhood bed, his marriage over before it had really begun. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. I'd been right about Vanessa all along. But all I felt was tired and sad. Sad for Marcus, for the pain he was going through. Sad that the time and money wasted. Sad that things had to end so dramatically. But mostly, I felt relieved. Relieved that Marcus had seen the truth. Relieved that he'd found the courage to walk away. Relieved that he wouldn't spend the next 20 years in a toxic marriage, slowly losing himself piece by piece. I fell asleep that night with an ice pack on my face and gratitude in my heart. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. I padded into the kitchen to find Marcus cooking breakfast, scrambled eggs, Aiken toast. Orange juice. He'd been up for a while. I could tell by how much he'd accomplished. "Morning, Mom," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. His face looked puffy from crying, and he had dark circles under his eyes. "Morning, honey. You didn't have to cook." I wanted to. I needed to do something with my hands. We sat down to eat. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Marcus said, "My phone has 73 missed calls and 216 text messages. From Vanessa? From everyone. Vanessa, her mother, my friends, people asking what happened, people taking sides. I turned it off. I can't deal with it yet." "That's okay. You don't have to deal with anything today. Just rest." But even as I said it, I knew the real work was just beginning. There would be legal issues to sort out. The marriage would need to be annulled or quickly divorced. There would be financial issues. What about all the wedding expenses, the gifts that had been given, the honeymoon that had been booked? There would be emotional fallout. Marcus would need time to heal, to process, to understand what had happened. And there would be consequences for Vanessa, too, though I didn't know what those would be yet. Marcus stayed with me for 3 days, 3 days of quiet recovery, of sitting in the garden, of long conversations about everything and nothing, 3 days of him slowly coming back to himself, eating more, sleeping better, laughing occasionally at old memories. On the 3rd day, he finally turned his phone back on. The messages had grown to over 400. He scrolled through them, his face going through a range of emotions. "Some people are supportive," he said, saying I did the right thing. "But others?" He trailed off. "Others what?" "Others are saying I'm a coward, that I embarrassed Vanessa publicly, that I should have handled it privately, that calling off a wedding in front of 200 people was cruel." I felt anger flare in my chest. "Those people didn't see what she did. They didn't hear what she said." "Actually, most of them did. Someone recorded the whole thing on their phone. It's online. The video of Vanessa slapping you, me calling off the wedding, all of it. It's everywhere." My stomach dropped. "Everywhere?" He showed me his phone. The video had been posted to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. It had hundreds of thousands of views. The comments were brutal. People calling Vanessa a monster. People calling Marcus a hero. People analyzing every second of the footage. People making jokes. "Oh, honey," I said softly. "Yeah," he put his phone down. "I'm internet famous for having the worst wedding day ever. That's great." But as it turned out, the viral video ended up being a blessing in disguise. Because over the next few days, Marcus started receiving messages from people who'd known Vanessa, people who'd worked with her, people who'd dated her, people who'd been her friends. They all had stories. Stories about Vanessa's cruelty, her manipulation, her vindictiveness. Stories about how she'd gotten people fired, spread rumors, destroyed relationships. Stories about how she treated service workers, how she'd screamed at waitresses and hotel staff and anyone she perceived as beneath her. One woman reached out to say she'd dated Marcus briefly years ago, before Vanessa. Vanessa had found out and had spent 6 months spreading false rumors about this woman at their shared workplace until she'd been forced to quit. A former coworker of Vanessa's said she'd watched Vanessa sabotage a colleague's presentation to make herself look better, then play innocent when the colleague confronted her. A man who dated Vanessa for 2 years said she'd stolen money from his bank account, then convinced him he was crazy when he noticed it missing. The stories kept coming, dozens of them, hundreds eventually, all painting the same picture of a woman who was charming on the surface but toxic underneath. "I had no idea," Marcus said, reading through the messages. "I thought she was just particular. I thought she was perfectionistic. I didn't realize she was like this with everyone." "People like Vanessa are very good at hiding who they really are," I said gently. "They show you what they want you to see until they have you locked down. Then the mask comes off." He looked at me. "How did you see through her so quickly?" "I'm your mother. It's my job to see through people who might hurt you. Plus, I've been around long enough to recognize the signs." She reminded me of a woman I worked with for years at the school. Same tactics, same cruelty, same sense of entitlement. I knew what to look for. Marcus spent the next week contacting lawyers. The annulment was surprisingly easy because the marriage had lasted less than a day and had never been consummated. It qualified for a quick annulment in Ohio. Within 2 weeks, it was as if the marriage had never legally happened. The financial fallout was messier. Marcus had paid for most of the wedding, the venue, the catering, the photographer, the videographer. Vanessa's parents had paid for the dress, the flowers, and some other smaller items. None of it was refundable. $73,000, Marcus said again one evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of whiskey. Gone, just gone. "Think of it as tuition," I said. "You paid $73,000 to learn one of life's most important lessons. Trust your instincts and pay attention to red flags." He laughed bitterly. "That's one expensive education. Cheaper than a divorce would have been. Cheaper than years of therapy to recover from an abusive marriage. Cheaper than losing yourself completely." He considered that. "You're right. You're absolutely right." But the money wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was the emotional recovery. Marcus had to come to terms with the fact that he'd almost married someone who didn't really love him, that she'd seen him as a meal ticket, a stepping stone, a means to an end, that the woman he'd thought he loved had never really existed. She'd been a performance designed to hook him. He spent a lot of time talking to a therapist, a real one, a trauma specialist, who helped him understand what had happened. She explained something called narcissistic abuse, how people like Vanessa use love bombing, gaslighting, and manipulation to control their partners, how they isolate you from your support system, how they make you doubt your own perceptions. She was doing all of that, Marcus told me after one of his therapy sessions. telling me you were overprotective and trying to control me, suggesting that my friends weren't supportive of our relationship, making me feel like I was lucky she chose me. God, Mom, I was so stupid. You weren't stupid. You were manipulated. There's a difference. He stayed with me for 6 weeks total. 6 weeks of healing and processing and slowly rebuilding his sense of self. He took a leave of absence from his job, saying he needed time to deal with personal matters. He stopped looking at social media. He started running again, something he'd loved in college but had given up during his relationship with Vanessa. And slowly, day by day, I watched my son come back to life. One evening in late June, about 5 weeks after the wedding, we were sitting on my back porch watching the sunset. Marcus had been quiet all day, thoughtful. "I need to tell you something," he finally said. My heart jumped. "What is it?" "After Dad died, you could have remarried. You could have found someone else. You were only 31, but you didn't. You stayed single and focused on raising me. I never understood why." I thought about Tom, about the life we'd planned together that had been cut so short. "I didn't want to bring someone into your life who might not be good for you," I said simply. "And I never met anyone who made me feel like they would add to our lives instead of complicating them. You put me first, always, even when it meant being alone. That's what mothers do. And I was about to shut you out of my life for Vanessa. I was going to let her separate us. If she hadn't hit you that night, if she'd managed to keep her mask on a little longer, I might have gone through with it. I might have married her and then slowly stopped calling you, stopped visiting, because that's what she wanted. She wanted me isolated and dependent on her." He started crying then, quiet tears running down his face. "I almost lost you, Mom. I almost gave up the most important relationship in my life for someone who didn't even really love me." I reached over and took his hand. "But you didn't. When it mattered, when you saw who she really was, you made the right choice. You chose truth over comfort. You chose integrity over avoiding embarrassment. You chose love over fear. I'm so proud of you, Marcus." "I love you, Mom. I love you too, honey, more than you'll ever know." We sat there holding hands while the sun set over my little garden, and I felt a peace I hadn't felt in over a year. My son was safe. He was healing. We were together. Everything else would work itself out. By mid-July, Marcus was ready to go back to Columbus and resume his life. He'd done the work, the therapy, the processing, the grieving for the relationship he thought he had. He'd learned his lessons. He was ready to move forward. "Are you sure?" I asked when he told me he'd rented a new apartment, different from the one he'd shared with Vanessa. "You can stay here as long as you want." "I know, Mom, but it's time. I need to start rebuilding my life, and I can't do that if I'm hiding in Millbrook." He was right, of course, but I'd gotten used to having him around again, used to making breakfast for two, used to our evening conversations on the porch, used to not being alone in my little house. But that's what mothers do. We let our children go, even when it breaks our hearts a little. The day he moved into his new place, I helped him unpack. It was a nice apartment, smaller than the one he'd shared with Vanessa, but brighter somehow, more him. He'd bought simple, practical furniture, nothing fancy, nothing expensive, nothing that screamed, "Look how successful I am." Just comfortable, functional pieces that made the space feel like home. "This is perfect," I told him, looking around the living room. "It's not much. It's honest. It's real. It's you." He smiled. I missed being me. Before I left to drive back to Millbrook, Marcus hugged me tight. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for putting up with Vanessa, for letting me stay, for not saying I told you so, for being my mom. Always, honey, always." The drive home felt longer than usual. The house felt emptier when I got back. I walked through the rooms, so quiet now, so still, and felt the weight of my life settling back around me. Back to work on Monday, back to my routine, back to being alone. But that night, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Hey, Mom, I just wanted to say goodnight and to tell you I'm going to call you every Sunday evening just to check in, catch up, talk about our weeks, if that's okay with you." My eyes filled with tears. "That's more than okay with me, honey. I'm not going to be a stranger, Mom. I'm not going to let weeks or months go by without talking to you. You're too important to me. I see that now." And he kept that promise. Every Sunday evening at 7 o'clock, my phone would ring. We'd talk for an hour, sometimes longer. He'd tell me about his week, about his job, about the friends he was reconnecting with. I'd tell him about the school, about my garden, about the small happenings in Billbrook. Over the next few months, I watched from a distance as Marcus rebuilt his life. He threw himself into his work, earning a promotion to senior accountant. He started dating again, casually, nothing serious, just learning how to trust again. He joined a running club and made new friends. He started therapy and stuck with it, working through his trauma. And every Sunday at 7 o'clock, my phone would ring. Meanwhile, word of what had happened spread through the community. At first, people asked me about it constantly, at church, at the grocery store, at work. Everyone wanted to know the story, wanted the inside details. I kept my answers simple. My son made the right decision. That's all that matters. Eventually, the gossip died down. People found new things to talk about. Life moved on. But there were consequences for Vanessa, too. The viral video had included her full name. A Google search of Vanessa Pritchard now brought up dozens of articles about the wedding slap heard around the internet. Her social media accounts, once full of carefully curated photos of her perfect life, went dark. Marcus heard through mutual connections that she'd lost her job in marketing. The company didn't want to be associated with the negative publicity. She'd moved back in with her mother. She tried to spin the story, claiming Marcus had been abusive, claiming I had attacked her first, claiming the video was edited. But too many people had been there. Too many people had seen the truth with their own eyes. I didn't take any pleasure in her downfall. I'm not a vindictive person, but I won't lie. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people terribly and expect no repercussions. In September, 4 months after the wedding, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Evelyn? This is Patricia Pritchard, Vanessa's mother." I went still. "Hello, Patricia." There was a long pause. Then, "I'm calling to apologize for everything, for how Vanessa treated you, for how I treated you, for not seeing what my daughter had become." I didn't know what to say. "I thought she was just particular," Patricia continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought she was a perfectionist who knew what she wanted. I didn't realize she was cruel. I didn't realize she was abusive. But after everything came out, after all those people shared their stories, I had to face the truth about my daughter." "That must be very difficult for you," I said carefully. "It is. But you know what's more difficult? Knowing that I enabled her, that I made excuses for her behavior, that I taught her that money and status and appearances were more important than kindness and integrity. That's on me, and I'm sorry." I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Thank you for apologizing. I appreciate it. How is Marcus?" "He's doing well. He's healing. It takes time, but he's getting there." "I'm glad." Another pause. "Vanessa is getting help, real help. She's in therapy, working through some deep-seated issues. I don't know if she'll ever really change, but at least she's trying." "I hope it helps her," I said, and I meant it. After we hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about that conversation, about how even the worst situations can lead to growth, about how sometimes it takes a crisis to force people to see the truth. In October, Marcus started dating someone new. Her name was Rebecca, and she was a teacher at an elementary school in Columbus. He told me about her on our Sunday call, his voice uncertain. "I really like her, Mom, but I'm scared. What if I'm wrong about her too? What if I can't see the red flags again?" "Tell me about her," I said. He talked for 20 minutes about how Rebecca was funny and kind, about how she volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends, about how she'd insisted on paying for their second date because he'd paid for the first, about how she'd asked about me, wanted to know about his family, about how she'd never once criticized his apartment or his car or his clothes. "She sounds wonderful," I said. "Will you meet her? I know it's early, but I want your opinion. I trust your judgment, Mom. You saw through Vanessa from day one. I need you to meet Rebecca and tell me what you think." 2 weeks later, Marcus drove Rebecca down to Millbrook. I prepared lunch, nothing fancy, just homemade chicken salad sandwiches and lemonade and cookies from the bakery on Main Street. I was nervous. What if I didn't like her? What if I saw red flags? Would Marcus listen to me this time, or would my concerns just push him away? The doorbell rang at noon on a Saturday. I took a deep breath and answered it. Rebecca was lovely, not in the polished, intimidating way Vanessa had been, but in a natural, warm way. She had curly brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, freckles across her nose, and a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. She carried a bouquet of sunflowers. "Mrs. Clark, these are for you," she said, offering the flowers. "Marcus mentioned you love gardening, and I thought sunflowers might brighten up your kitchen." Already she was different from Vanessa, thoughtful, warm, not trying to impress, just trying to be kind. We sat down to lunch. Rebecca asked about my garden, actually listening to the answers instead of waiting for her turn to talk. She told me about her students, second graders who she clearly adored. She asked about Millbrook, about the history of the town, about my job at the elementary school. She complimented my house, not in a fake way, but genuinely. "This place feels like a real home," she said. "You can tell it's been loved." After lunch, Marcus excused himself to take a phone call, leaving Rebecca and me alone in the kitchen while I washed dishes. "I know what happened with Vanessa," Rebecca said quietly. "Marcus told me everything. I want you to know that I understand if you're cautious about me, if you need time to trust me. I'm not in a hurry." I turned to look at her. "Marcus told you everything?" "Everything. The whole story. I actually saw the video before I met him. Everyone in Columbus saw it. I was one of the people leaving comments saying he did the right thing. When I met him at a mutual friend's party and realized who he was, I almost didn't approach him. I thought he'd probably want nothing to do with dating for a while. But we got talking and," she smiled, "he's a really good man. You raised him right." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. I mean it. And I want you to know, I'm not here to replace you or push you out of Marcus's life. I'm here because I really like your son, and I know how important you are to him. So if we're going to make this work, you and I need to get along. I'd like us to be friends if possible." That's when I knew. This woman was nothing like Vanessa. This woman was genuine and kind and secure enough in herself that she didn't need to tear other people down. This woman would be good for Marcus. After they left, Marcus called me that evening. "Well, what did you think?" "I think she's wonderful, honey. I think you should hold on to her." I heard the relief in his voice. "Really? You really like her?" "I really, really like her. She's exactly the kind of person you deserve." 6 months later, Rebecca and I had lunch together, just the two of us, no Marcus. We met at a little cafe in Columbus and spent 2 hours talking and laughing. She told me about her childhood, her dreams of becoming a principal someday, her struggles with her own family. I told her about Tom, about raising Marcus alone, about my fears and hopes. By the end of lunch, she felt like a daughter to me. Or at least what I imagined having a daughter might feel like. "Thank you for giving me a chance," she said as we were leaving. "I know after Vanessa, it would have been easy for you to be suspicious of anyone Marcus dated." "You made it easy to trust you," I said simply. "You're authentic. That's all I ever wanted for Marcus, someone who's real." A year after the wedding disaster, Marcus and Rebecca got engaged. He proposed on a hiking trip, no fanfare, no expensive ring, just a simple question and a heartfelt yes. When he called to tell me, I cried happy tears. "We're not doing a big wedding," he said, "just immediate family and close friends, maybe 20 people total. In your backyard, if that's okay with you. Rebecca loves your garden." My backyard, where Tom and I had gotten married 40 years earlier, where Marcus had learned to walk and played as a child, where I'd planted roses and tended vegetables and found peace in the soil. "It's more than okay with me," I said. "It's perfect." And it was perfect. On a warm Saturday in September, with 20 people watching, Marcus married Rebecca in my backyard. No 5-tier cake, no string quartet, no $8,000 dress. Just love and commitment and joy. Rebecca wore a simple white sundress she'd bought online for $150. Marcus wore a suit he already owned. I made the food myself, sandwiches and salads and a sheet cake from the grocery store. My sister played piano. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. It was the most beautiful wedding I'd ever seen. At the reception, which was really just everyone hanging around in the backyard eating and talking, Rebecca pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said, "for welcoming me into your family, for trusting me with your son, for this beautiful wedding. Just thank you." I hugged her tight. "Thank you for loving him, for seeing who he really is, for being patient while he healed. Thank you for being you." That night, after everyone had gone home and Marcus and Rebecca had left for their honeymoon, a weekend camping trip, nothing fancy, I sat on my back porch and looked up at the stars. I thought about how different this day had been from that day 14 months ago, how love looks different when it's real, how the best things in life are usually the simplest, how sometimes you have to go through darkness to appreciate the light. My cheek had long since healed from Vanessa's slap, but the memory of that moment, the moment my son chose truth over comfort, chose love over fear, that memory would stay with me forever. Because that was the moment Marcus saved himself. That was the moment he took control of his own life. That was the moment he became the man I always knew he could be. And I got to be there to witness it. It's been 3 years now since that disastrous wedding day. 3 years of watching Marcus thrive in his marriage to Rebecca. Of Sunday phone calls that sometimes turn into hour-long conversations. Of holidays spent together. Of watching him become whole again. I'm 65 now, officially retired from the elementary school as of last June. I have more time for my garden, more time for my church, more time for the things that matter, and more time with my son and daughter-in-law, who visit at least twice a month. Last Christmas, Rebecca and Marcus announced they were expecting a baby, my first grandchild, a little girl they planned to name Evelyn, Evie for short, after me. When Rebecca told me, I cried. Happy tears, grateful tears, tears of joy for this full circle moment. Tom would have been so proud. Proud of Marcus, proud of the family he's building, proud of the life he's creating. Sometimes I think about Vanessa. I wonder where she is, what she's doing, if she ever really changed. I heard through the grapevine that she moved to another state, started over somewhere fresh where people didn't know her story. I hope she found peace. I hope she got the help she needed. I hope she learned to be kind. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. She was a chapter in Marcus's life, a painful one, a difficult one, but a chapter nonetheless, and that chapter is closed now. People sometimes ask me how I knew to stay quiet during that whole engagement, how I knew not to push, not to criticize too openly, not to drive Marcus away with my concerns. The truth is, I didn't know. I was terrified the whole time that I was making the wrong choice. Terrified that by staying silent, I was enabling him to make a terrible mistake. Terrified that I'd lose him to Vanessa's manipulation. But I've learned something in my 65 years on this earth. You can't protect the people you love from every mistake. Sometimes they have to touch the hot stove to learn it burns. Sometimes they have to make bad choices to appreciate good ones. Sometimes they have to walk through darkness to find the light. All you can do is be there, be present, be steady, be the safe place they can return to when everything falls apart. That's what I tried to be for Marcus, and in the end, when he needed me most, I was there. I'll never forget that moment in the ballroom, the crack of Vanessa's hand across my face, the shocked silence, and then my son's voice cutting through it all. The wedding is off. In that moment, I'd taken a hit, a literal one, but Marcus had taken back his life, and that made every second of pain worth it. Now I look at my life and I see richness. Not in money. I'm still living on a modest retirement income, still in my little house with its worn carpet and secondhand furniture, but rich in relationships, in love, in family. Marcus calls me almost every day now, not just Sundays. Rebecca and I have lunch once a month. They're already talking about moving to Millbrook after the baby is born so I can help with childcare. So Evie can grow up knowing her grandmother the way Marcus knew his parents. My garden is thriving. My friendships are deep. My church community is strong. My sister is my constant companion and support. My son is happy and healthy and whole. This is what victory looks like. Not the dramatic movie kind with swelling music and perfect resolutions, but the quiet, steady kind. The kind that accumulates over days and months and years. The kind built on small choices and faithful presence and unconditional love. I am 65 years old. I am a widow. I am a retired elementary school secretary. I am a woman of modest means living in a small town in Ohio. And I am blessed beyond measure. So here's what I want to say to anyone listening to this story, especially to the mothers out there, especially to the women who are watching someone they love make a terrible mistake and feeling helpless to stop it. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. You're not being paranoid or overprotective or jealous. You're picking up on signals that your rational mind hasn't quite processed yet. Don't ignore those feelings. Second, you can't force people to see what they're not ready to see. You can point out red flags, you can share your concerns, but ultimately, people have to come to their own conclusions, and sometimes they have to learn the hard way. Third, be the safe place. When everything falls apart, and if the situation is bad enough, it will fall apart eventually, be the place they can come home to. No judgment, no I told you so, just open arms and unconditional love. Fourth, know your worth. Vanessa tried to make me feel small, poor, old-fashioned, inadequate. She criticized my house, my clothes, my cooking, my choices. And for a while, I started to believe her. But here's the truth. My worth isn't determined by the size of my house, or the price of my dress, or the sophistication of my dinner parties. My worth comes from the love I give, the integrity I maintain, and the person I choose to be. Fifth, it's never too late to walk away from something that's wrong. Marcus walked away on his wedding day in front of 200 people after spending $73,000. That took incredible courage. But you know what would have taken more courage? Staying in that marriage for years, trying to make it work, slowly losing himself in the process. Walking away wasn't the coward's choice, it was the brave one. Sixth, the right people will celebrate who you are. Vanessa wanted Marcus to be someone different, wealthier, more sophisticated, more willing to bend to her will. Rebecca loves Marcus exactly as he is. That's the difference. The right person won't try to change you or diminish you or make you feel like you're not enough. They'll celebrate your strengths and accept your weaknesses and love you for who you actually are. And finally, there's always time to start over. Marcus was 34, divorced, or annulled technically, living with his mother, emotionally devastated and financially decimated. He could have given up. He could have decided love wasn't worth the risk. But he didn't. He did the work, he healed, he tried again, and he found Rebecca. It's never too late to begin again. I think about younger me sometimes, the 31-year-old widow with a 7-year-old son, wondering how she'd make it through. I think about all the nights I lay awake worrying about money, about Marcus's future, about whether I was doing anything right. I think about how scared I was, how uncertain, how overwhelmed. If I could go back and talk to her, I'd tell her, "You're doing better than you think. That boy you're raising, he's going to turn out just fine. He's going to make mistakes, big ones, but he's going to learn from them. He's going to find real love. He's going to make you so proud." And that little house you're embarrassed about? The one with the worn carpet and the secondhand furniture? That house is going to be filled with love and laughter and memories. That house is going to be the place your son comes home to when he needs safety. That house is going to host his second wedding and become the place your granddaughter learns to walk. You're enough. Your love is enough. Your presence is enough. Keep going. Keep showing up. Keep being steady and faithful and true. It's all going to be okay. As for me, I'm sitting here now in my backyard, watching my tomatoes ripen and my roses bloom. Rebecca is due in 2 months, and Marcus is already building a nursery in their guest room. They've asked me to be in the delivery room when Evie is born. I said yes. I'm thinking about painting the guest room in my house, the one that used to be Marcus's bedroom. Painting it a soft yellow, adding a crib, making it a place where my granddaughter can stay when she visits, making it a place where a new generation can build memories. I'm thinking about the future and feeling hopeful. Feeling grateful, feeling like after 65 years of living, I finally understand what matters. Not money, not appearances, not what other people think. Just love, just family, just showing up day after day and being faithful to the people who matter most. That's what I tried to do for Marcus. Through his childhood, through his father's death, through the Vanessa disaster, through his healing and rebuilding, I just kept showing up. I just kept loving him. I just kept being there. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. So if you're watching this and you're in a situation like I was, watching someone you love make a terrible mistake, feeling helpless and afraid, I want you to know, keep showing up. Keep loving them. Keep being their safe place. You can't control what choices they make, but you can control what kind of person you are. You can control whether you're there when they need you. And sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do. Be steady, be faithful, be love. The rest will work itself out. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to walk away from what's wrong and toward what's right. It's never too late to choose integrity over comfort, truth over convenience, love over fear. Marcus taught me that on his wedding day. My 34-year-old son, standing in front of 200 people, watching his mother get slapped by his bride, found the courage to say, "The wedding is off." That was the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do, and I'm honored to have witnessed it. Honored to have been part of his journey. Honored to be his mother. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for sticking with me through all the ups and downs, all the heartbreak and hope. Thank you for letting me share this part of my life with you. If you got something from this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment telling me your own story. I read every single one, and your stories matter to me. Most of all, remember, you're stronger than you think, you're braver than you know, and you're never too old to stand up for what's right. My name is Evelyn Clark. I'm 65 years old. I live in Millbrook, Ohio. I'm a widow, a mother, and soon to be a grandmother. And I'm here to tell you, it's going to be okay. Whatever you're going through, whatever mistakes have been made, whatever pain you're carrying, it's going to be okay. Keep showing up. Keep being love. Keep having faith that things will work out the way they're meant to. And know that somewhere in Ohio, there's a 65-year-old woman who believes in you. God bless you all. Take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, it's never too late to start over. Never.